Hi, welcome to Bookie. Today we'll unlock the book Buffett, The Making of an American Capitalist. From January to May every year, investors from all over the world go on a pilgrimage to Omaha, a small city in the Midwest of the United States, to absorb Warren Buffett's wisdom on investment. Buffett's articles and words are regarded as a Bible by his many fans who recite his words as if they're sacred verse. Buffett says finance and investment are as easy as talking about the weather with grocery staff. When he speaks, he never uses difficult or obscure academic terms that sound foreign to listeners. Even ordinary people without any background knowledge can understand his analysis of the financial world. The reason why Buffett is so adored by people lies in his great achievements and charming personality. In 2008, Buffett surpassed Bill Gates on the Forbes 400 to become the richest man in the world. He had $62 billion in assets. Unlike other successful people, he's the only person who attained his unprecedented riches through investment alone. He's also an entrepreneur and former corporate manager. Buffett is not a serious man in a suit who sits in an office building. He's more like everyone's favorite uncle. On one hand, he focuses on work, on the other, he's an easygoing and humorous man who always treats people kindly. There's no need to overstate Buffett's success. Although it's hard for us to summarize Buffett's life completely, we can learn from his investment experience and life wisdom. This biography describes Buffett's life during 3 periods and shows us how he gained his investment experience in boyhood, youth, middle and old age. We'll get to know Buffett's rules for living, his investment philosophy, and why he does what he does. The author of this book is Roger Lowenstein, a senior financial reporter for the Wall Street Journal. To write this book, Lowenstein researched Buffett and collected materials for many years. He also conducted several interviews with Buffett's family, friends, business partners and so on, and their stories gave him a comprehensive, true and detailed picture of the great investor. The result is a classic of investment literature that every global investor should read. Next, we'll summarize the book in 3 parts. Part 1, The Boyhood Buffett. Part 2, The Young Buffett. Part 3, The Middle-Aged and Elderly Buffett. In 1929, the United States plunged suddenly into the Great Depression, which destroyed financial markets and human lives across the country and around the world. Buffett was born in the second year of the Great Depression, 1930, in Omaha, Nebraska. He was a 6-pound baby and was born 5 weeks prematurely. Warren Buffett would later dominate the financial world. However, in the years around his birth, most American people, including Buffett's family members, were struggling. During the Great Depression, thousands of people in the United States were unemployed, and most of them needed government relief to survive. By 1933, more than 11,000 people in Buffett's hometown Omaha had applied for government relief. Buffett's mother didn't have a stable job and the bank where his father worked closed. After this, his father started a company to sell investment securities. Buffett lived in poverty during his childhood, and these difficult years left him with deep and lasting memories. The fear of poverty and the desire to become rich pushed Buffett to start considering how to make more money. When other children were playing with each other, Buffett at the age of 5 set up a small stall in front of his house to sell chewing gum. When he was 6, he sold Coke on the street, and he began to do market research when he was 9. Furthermore, Buffett sorted bottle caps that he picked up to figure out which drinks sold best, and by extension which company earned the most profit. Gradually, he dreamed up more and more ways to make money. Buffett once had a high fever when he was 7 years old. The doctor performed an ileocecal resection to cure him of his illness. After the operation, Buffett was very weak. However, instead of thinking about how to recover from his illness, he wrote numbers down on paper. A nurse asked him what these numbers represented. "I don't have much money now," Buffett replied cheerfully. "But someday I will, and I'll have my picture in the paper." Even at that young age, Buffett had a blueprint for his future and all of his expectations have been realized. Some people make money to make a living. For Buffett, his only desire was to become rich. This desire became a powerful motivation that drove Buffett further on his path to making money. He often read a book called 1000 Ways to Make $1,000. Inspired, he improved his blueprint and remembered the advice from the book, begin. Since then, Buffett became a doer and kept on his path of making money. Among those experiences, two were crucial in benefiting Buffett and helped to shape his philosophy: his part-time job in junior high school and his entrepreneurial experience in high school. When Buffett was in junior high school, he got a newspaper delivery job to make money. As he worked, Buffett found that many of his customers also wanted to read magazines. So he began to sell magazines while delivering newspapers. However, he soon encountered a problem. The subscribers in one residential building moved frequently and often forgot to pay Buffett their magazine fees before they left. To solve this problem, Buffett cooperated with the building's elevator operator. When a resident moved, the operator reported to Buffett immediately. In return, Buffett gave the operator free newspapers. In this way, Buffett spent only pennies to solve his problem. Buffett earned $175 per month in his part-time job, which was equivalent to the salary of a white-collar worker at that time. By the time he was 15, he was able to invest $1,200 in a 40-acre farm. This part-time work taught Buffett that it wouldn't be easy to realize his dreams, and that only by thinking actively can problems eventually be solved. Although he earned a lot by delivering newspapers, this didn't stop Buffett from pursuing greater wealth. The belief of begin not to wait was rooted in Buffett's heart for a long time. Buffett had always been preparing his plan to enter the financial world. In his senior year of high school, he started a new round of entrepreneurial practice. His friend Don Danley had a second-hand pinball machine. Both of them played it almost every day. One day, it occurred to Buffett that since it was so much fun to play the pinball machine, why not put the pinball machine in a barber shop and charge the customers per hour to use it? Buffett didn't contemplate too much about how he might expand, what kind of difficulties there would be, or whether the venture would be successful. He immediately found a barber shop and talked with the owner about cooperating. The barber shop provided space, and Buffett was responsible for providing and maintaining the pinball machines. In those days, there were no smartphones that allowed customers to kill time while waiting for their haircut. So to avoid boredom, they would play the pinball machine. Buffett and his friends made $14 on the opening day. After confirming the practicality of the idea, Buffett and Danley immediately expanded their business and opened 7 more stores within a month. They also gave the company a big name, the Wilson Coin-Operated Machine Company. After that, Buffett had a steady income of $50 every week. This entrepreneurial experience gave him unprecedented feelings of happiness and accomplishment. To avoid being targeted by organized crime, Warren and Danley decided to run their business in rural areas. And they only negotiated with barbershop owners by pretending to be young assistants, as if they were only obeying the orders of a powerful boss. Buffett's entrepreneurship tells us that we should never wait to act on our dreams, but think and reflect as we move forward until we achieve our goal. As Buffett's father ran a securities company, he was able to enlighten his son about stocks and bonds. Buffett had been particularly addicted to numbers since he was a child. When most children had little idea of what a company was, Buffett was already interpreting the numbers on ticker tapes he got from his father. When Buffett was 10, his father took him on a train to visit New York, Wall Street, and the New York Stock Exchange. Buffett was obsessed with stocks in the same way that other children were obsessed with toys. He often played at his father's securities company and other local securities companies. When he got back home, he would organize stock charts and try to discover the secrets within them. When Buffett was 11, he began to practice stock trading and bought 3 municipal preferred stocks for $38 each. After experiencing some ups and downs, he eventually earned his first profit on the stock market, $5. But the investment world is broad and deep. For Buffett, there were still a lot to learn and experience before he rose to fame. Next, let's take a look at Buffett's learning and investment practices in his youth. In 1947, Buffett graduated from high school. There was a comment at the bottom of his graduation photo, "Likes math, a future stockbroker." After more than 10 years of practice and exploration, together with his self-study of the theories described in more than 100 business books, Buffett had some decent investment knowledge. However, his father still suggested that he go to the Wharton School of Business because of its sterling reputation. Therefore, Buffett transferred ownership of his pinball company and took the proceeds to the Wharton School of Business. Just as Buffett had expected, the school did not surprise him at all. What Buffett wanted to learn was how to make more money, but the school just taught many broad theories. Buffett's dissatisfaction worsened. After a year of studying, instead of attending boring classes or studying useless theories, he spent most of his school time analyzing stock trends and meeting like-minded investors. However, although Buffett wasn't fond of the courses taught by his professors, he easily got perfect scores on his exams. He had a good memory for remembering what he read in books. His pure love for financial investment occupied most of his time and energy, so his interests weren't as extensive as those of his fellow students. Buffett didn't drink or chase girls in college. The other boys would usually talk about girls when they got together, but Buffett was shy and would blush whenever his roommates talked about sex. However, he was very animated when he talked about the gold standard. When he did, he became very confident and excited. His course load at Wharton would have been difficult for most ordinary people to complete. Buffett took 5 modules in 1949 and 6 in the spring of 1950. He continued to deliver newspapers off campus. It took him 3 years to complete all of the modules, which didn't throw a wrench into his full-time job of making money at all. After graduating, Buffett hoped to enroll in the Department of Finance at Columbia University to study stocks with Benjamin Graham, who was known as the father of value investment. We discussed this when we covered another book about Buffett's life, The Snowball, Warren Buffett and the Business of Life. Graham was the inventor of value investing and authority on the U.S. securities industry. His books Security Analysis, Principles and Technique and The Intelligent Investor are both classics in the investment field. By the way, we also have a bookie of The Intelligent Investor. If you're interested, you can listen to it as well. Graham's theory was to make investing in stocks less like gambling. He put forward the concept of value investing, which argued that the stock market was like a voting machine in the short term, but like a weighing machine in the long term. This meant that in the short term, the price of stocks would shift according to people's preferences and irrationality, which produced overvaluations and undervaluations. However, in the long run, under the influence of the market, a stock's price would return to the value of the company itself. Therefore, Graham's value investment strategy needed the investor to do one thing: to find undervalued stocks, buy them when the stock price was far below the stock's intrinsic value, and then sell them after the value of the stock rises again. This is the famous cigarette butt theory. Undervalued stocks are like cigarette butts that have been thrown out. Although these butts have been thrown away, those who pick them up can still take a few more puffs. Graham's lecture style was different from the one used by Buffett's previous old and pedantic professors. Graham encouraged student engagement in class. Like Socrates, he asked questions first, then students were free to discuss and debate the answers. Buffett was the youngest student in his class, but he knew the most. He knew the answers to almost every question. Graham's class opened another door for Buffett and took him to an entirely new realm of stock analysis. Buffett learned his systematic method of selecting stocks from Graham. Graham describes a parable about a man named Mr. Market. Imagine you own a small share that costs $1,000. One of your partners named Mr. Market tells you every day what he thinks your interest is worth, and also says whether he will either buy you out or to sell you an additional interest on that basis. Sometimes his conception of value appears plausible, but often Mr. Market lets his enthusiasm or his fears get ahead of him, and the value he proposes seems silly. Graham uses this parable to illustrate that investors are in this very spot. You can take advantage of the daily market or choose to ignore it, but Mr. Market always returns with a new one. Buffett was influenced by these new ideas and worshipped Graham as an idol. He aspired to become a second Graham. As long as Graham's bond brokerage company Graham Newman Corporation invested in stocks, Buffett would follow his mentor's lead and buy in. After graduation, Buffett returned to his hometown Omaha and worked at his father's securities company. It was during this period that a lovely girl named Susan Thompson entered Buffett's life. Buffett started to chase Susan in an unusually bold way. He went to her home and played the ukulele or piano every night. Susan's father adored this stubborn dark-haired guy very much. Susan respected her father and trusted her father's decision. Therefore, she agreed to date Buffett. It wasn't long before they fell in love. They married in April 1952. Buffett often vowed to people that he'd become rich, but the newlyweds settled down in a dilapidated apartment that they rented for only $65 per month. The mice would crawl into the couple's shoes at night. Even after the birth of their first daughter, Buffett was unwilling to buy a crib for her. Instead, he used the drawers of his dressing table to place her to sleep. In his career, Buffett got a lot of chances to practice and achieve success at his father's securities company. He carefully searched for cigarette butt stocks and continued considering expanding and improving his blueprint for life. Buffett was extremely introverted, and this was manifested in his aversion to crowds and parties in college. However, he decided to attend Dale Carnegie's public speaking class to overcome his introversion. You might ask, why did a 21-year-old stockbroker learn public speaking skills? Buffett's ambition was not limited to being a successful investor. He wanted to become someone with great social influence and a celebrity whose picture was always in the newspapers. After taking Carnegie's course, Buffett continued to polish his speaking skills by taking evening courses at the University of Omaha. He taught investment principles for several semesters. Once, a student asked him what Wall Street's secret for getting rich was. To liven up the class, Buffett closed the door and told his students, "You try to be greedy when others are fearful, and try to be very fearful when others are greedy." Buffett practiced and fine-tuned his knowledge in Omaha. However, if he wanted to make greater achievements, he needed to move up on a larger platform. Luckily, his mentor Graham's company came to the rescue and offered him a position at Graham Newman Crop. For Buffett, it was a dream come true. Buffett surprised his colleagues in his first year there. He found that the stock of the Union Street Railway was trading at only $45 per stock, yet the company's cash flow indicated a price of $120 per stock. Even his tutor Graham couldn't decide whether or not to buy, yet Buffett bought a lot of the stock and made a fortune by himself. In the following years, several investment events similar to this highlighted Graham's indecision and that Buffett was one step ahead of him. Graham's cigarette butt theory and market value were a bit too conservative for these cases. His theory limited investors' choice but was safe enough. This is because the economic crisis of 1929 had scared investors of Graham's age who by now preferred to be conservative and demanded stability. After a while in the investment field, Buffett felt limited by Graham's investment philosophy. They had different opinions regarding their work. Therefore, Buffett chose to get involved in private investment activities. Afterward, Buffett gradually began to establish a partnership. He prepared and planned everything in his bedroom. At the end of 1957, Buffett gained 5 major partners and raised almost $500,000 for operating capital. In his first year, the company made a respectable 10% profit on Buffett's various investments. After that, his career soared. Every day before he got out of bed, he considered how to make more money. In 1958, the income from his partnership exceeded 41%. Following this trend, at the end of the third year after Buffett founded the company, its total assets had doubled. Buffett's success was a burst of good fortune for the people of Omaha. Many of them left their money for Buffett to manage, and even more learned about investing from him. Some asked him for inside information. Buffett never believed in gossip or inside information. He only trusted financial statements and rational analysis. What he cherished particularly was the confidentiality of his market analyses. He even worried that his findings would be heard by his wife while he was sleeping and thus slip out to the public. Buffett realized his dream step by step. He outperformed the Dow Jones Index every year. In early 1966, the assets of Buffett's partnership reached $44 million. A story in his hometown's newspaper, the Omaha World-Herald, noted that one of the most successful investment businesses in the United States is operated in Omaha by a young man who bought his first stock at age 11. By this time, Buffett had entered middle age, but the expansion of his career has just begun. At the age of 29, Buffett met a man who was very similar to himself and would have a great influence on his investment philosophy in life. This man was the West Coast philosopher Charlie Munger. Before meeting Charlie Munger, Buffett had usually selected cheap cigarette butt stocks. However, Munger despised them. He believed that instead of putting effort and money into an awful company, investors should buy the stock of outstanding companies. Influenced by Munger, Buffett altered his stock selection method. He avoided being too limited. His subsequent management of Berkshire Hathaway reflected the changes in his investment philosophy. To put it simply, Buffett used the cigarette butt theory to establish and grow Berkshire Hathaway in the early stages. Then he followed an investment philosophy of spending more money on high-quality assets. Berkshire Hathaway is one of Buffett's biggest achievements. The company is now a diversified investment group. The company owns more than 80 subsidiaries in a diverse range of businesses including clothing, jewelry sales, real estate, energy, aircraft leasing, and railways. It also holds stock in famous companies such as American Express, Coca-Cola, The Washington Post, and Wells Fargo. However, in the early days, Hathaway and Berkshire were textile manufacturing companies. Following 2 world wars and economic crises, the two companies shared a similar trajectory. Both of them remained profitable for a while, but soon found themselves in trouble. Considering their prospects, leaders of the two companies decided to merge them into Berkshire Hathaway in 1955 after a series of negotiations. However, textile manufacturing was a sunset industry at the time. The company's stock price dropped. Until the 1950s, Buffett worked at Graham-Newman Corporation. By the end of 1962, the stock price of Berkshire Hathaway had fallen below $8 per share. However, since its operating capital per share was as high as $16.50, the company had huge potential value. Buffett saw this potential and bought some stock, planning to be patient and hold it for many years. Later, as Buffett's enthusiasm in investment grew, he bought a more sizable chunk of Berkshire Hathaway stock and became its largest shareholder in 1963. After long-term visits, inspections, negotiations, and operations, Buffett finally became the director of Berkshire Hathaway and took over the company. Buffett never regarded Berkshire Hathaway as a textile manufacturing company. Instead, he felt the company should gain a substantial profit from its capital expenditures. At that time, Buffett had been researching an insurance company for a long time. This was because textile manufacturing companies had to spend a lot of money on equipment, but insurance could use the float between insurance premiums and debt paying to bring in a steady stream of cash flow. Buffett believed that the float in the insurance industry was as powerful as rocket fuel and that insurance companies could be a cash channel for investment. Therefore, Buffett bought a local workers' compensation company that supplied sufficient cash flow for Berkshire Hathaway's large-scale operations. Thanks to this increase in the company's funds, the company developed fast. In the following years, Berkshire Hathaway acquired the Sun Newspapers of Omaha Incorporated and later bought the Illinois National Bank and Trust. In this way, Buffett gradually used Berkshire Hathaway's capital to invest in the insurance, banking, and publishing industries. The company's business scope expanded even further. By 1970, Buffett owned 29% of Berkshire Hathaway shares and had become the chairman of the board. For the first time, he wrote a letter to all Berkshire Hathaway shareholders as part of its annual report. Since then, Buffett's habit of writing letters to shareholders has persisted, and these letters have become classic readings for investors. We also mention these letters in the bookie The Essays of Warren Buffett, Lessons for Investors and Managers. After that, Buffett became more and more familiar with how capital works. The huge profits from Berkshire Hathaway gave Buffett more leeway to enter other areas, such as publishing via the Washington Post. At that time, Philip Leslie Graham, the publisher of the Post, committed suicide. His wife Katharine Graham took over the company and became the chairman of the board. Her challenge was not only to accept the burden of managing the company but also to withstand the tremendous pressure to disclose the Watergate scandal. Once the controversial story broke, public opinion was turbulent. The Post was threatened and suppressed by the administration of Richard Nixon and multiple advocacy groups, which caused the company's stock price to drop. Buffett made a decision. He bought a large number of Post shares, which helped the company weather the crisis. After this, Buffett and Katharine Graham became close friends. Berkshire Hathaway has also made large-scale investments in Coca-Cola, Disney, and other companies. In short, upgraded value investing reinforced Buffett's investment philosophy, which expanded the variety of stocks Buffett could invest in and ensured his company's profitability. Multidimensional thinking and corporate management gave Buffett a stable source of funds. More funds enable more investment, and more investment reaps more rewards. Using this cycle of investing money to make more money, Buffett has reached the heights in every respect. What's more remarkable is that he's remained at the top of his game for decades. Today, thanks to the intelligence and wisdom of its founder Berkshire Hathaway, which was on the verge of bankruptcy 50 years ago, is one of the world's most profitable companies. Its net assets have increased from $22.887 million in 1964 to $162 billion at the end of 2001, and its share price has risen from $7 to $90,000. By 2008, Buffett's wealth had grown to $62 billion, a thousandfold increase worth tens of millions of dollars. His multidimensional accumulation of wealth made the impossible possible and made him the first person to become the world's richest man through investment alone. Well, that concludes our overview of Buffett, the making of an American capitalist. Now, let's summarize what we've heard. First, we talked about Buffett as a boy. He was born in Omaha, Nebraska just after the start of the Great Depression, and always wanted to be rich. He started doing business at a very young age and earned a bit of money. He delivered newspapers and magazines in high school and achieved his first business success. In the second part, we followed young Buffett to school at the Wharton School of Business, and then Columbia University under the supervision of the legendary investor Benjamin Graham to learn stock analysis. Entering the investment world after graduation, Buffett had practice at his father's securities company in Omaha and then worked at a company founded by Graham and his partners. Buffett's enthusiasm for investment became more and more robust, and he decided to set up a partnership by himself and manage other people's assets, which was extremely successful. Third, we learned about the middle-aged and elderly Buffett. Inspired by Charlie Munger, Buffett shook off the limitations of Graham's investment philosophy. He began to expand his business. Berkshire Hathaway, created from the ashes of two struggling textile manufacturing companies, gradually became a corporation overseeing a diverse range of businesses based on an insurance group under Buffett's leadership. It became one of the most profitable companies in the world, and Buffett became the richest man in the world in 2008 thanks to the company's success. Awesome! You just unlocked all key insights.